Hello and welcome to this overview of the new features in Hexographer 2, also known as Worldographer. I'm Joe Wetzel, the creator of the program, and what you see in front of you here is the initial screen after you've installed the program, started it up, and clicked through some license stuff. To start a new map, you're going to come up here to File, New, and this is kind of our start screen where you can set some values for a new map. Again, focusing on the things that are new in Hexographer 2, we have better integration with an icosahedral map projection. If you're not familiar with that, imagine a D20 that's kind of been unrolled, and you've got 20 triangles that are flat for a map. The old Traveler maps would use that. Traveler planet maps would use that, as well as there's a lot of other world books and world building tools and tutorials and so forth who use that projection. I will note that if you're using that projection, you want to use the rows line up hex orientation. That's truer to the Traveler maps. It's also, the math works out better. You can choose any value for the size of your map projection, which we do as a triangle side size. So instead of a map projection, or rather, instead of picking the number of hexes high and the number of hexes wide of a flat map, this is how large do you want each of those triangles to be that makes up that icosahedral projection. 12 hexes on each triangle's edge is what we're setting here. That's the default. That's good for a smaller map for the purposes of our demo. If you do leave hex orientation as columns line up, you'd want to make that a multiple of 4. You want to make sure it's a multiple of 4. The math works out better, especially when you're going from layer to layer. Level to level, I should say. And that brings up another key concept or another key feature in Worldographer, which is the initial or the view levels. And the initial view level of being world or continent or kingdom. I like to work top down, so that's why world is the default. So this allows you to have multiple maps in your overall map file. You can have one which focuses on the high level information, the continents, the nations, the capital cities. And then you can have a continent level where you have more cities in there, maybe some larger towns, rivers, and so forth, more minor rivers, if you will. The kingdom level then would be all the details about a particular kingdom. Now, it's one map for the entire world, so you'd have all of your kingdoms in it, but that gives you the details of each individual kingdom on that map level. So if you want to work bottom up, you can pick kingdom, but you'd of course want to make a much larger map to start with. So as you go up in level, that you'll still have a large enough map to be interesting. So we're going to stick with world level, and we're going to show how that works later in the tutorial. On the other side over here, we can pick, do we want to have just all one terrain where we want to place everything by hand, where you can start with either a blank map or a map of all farmland or ocean. If you start with a blank map, you could also use our terrain wizard functionality, which is in Hexographer 1, which does a nearest neighbor fill, so you can kind of sketch in the map terrain and then it will fill in the rest. Or you can pick generate the terrain. So this will create a world that will be somewhat Earth-like based on these values. You can change them up if you want to. And then finally, terrain icons. So another big thing in Hexographer 2 is the civilization style graphics that we've added, which we're calling the isometric style, because they do have a little bit of a squished look to things. And go ahead and generate map. And it goes through its algorithm. Now, because we're on a smaller display for the purposes of the video here, this map is a little bit smaller as far as how much of the space is it taking up compared to the sidebars. But what I want to do before I go any further is I'm going to play with the settings for the size of our hexes. I find that the isometric icons work a little bit better if they look a little bit better if they're a little bit more squished. So I'm going to squish them a little bit. I'm also going to zoom in so that you guys can get a better look at them. All of these have been done by Keith Curtis, who's a great cartographer artist that we work with a lot. And that gives you a better view of what these icons look like. Yeah, that turned out over here in the mini map. So sometimes you might run into an issue where it doesn't redraw fully. That just depends on how much memory has been in use at different times and so forth. So you can hit a refresh button over there and you can get it filled in a little bit better. I'm going to focus on these drawers for the next couple of minutes. If you're familiar with Hexographer, you know about the sidebar with the different options for adding terrain and icons and so forth. Here, one thing that's really important now is the fact that you can filter everything. So if you're working with the isometric icon set, you can set it to filter for isometric. You can even add in the text box rows so that you focus on just the row orientation hexes. You can even add in, what type of terrain you want, and it's going to give you all the terrain that has the word desert in it. And adding terrain is pretty easy. It's just point and click. I'm going to show one of the ways that Hexographer 2 is different. With the icosahedral projection, there's functionality so that if you change terrain, the other side, the other half of that hex, if you will, gets reflected to match. Another thing on the terrain drawer here is the fact that you can select a particular hex and then you pull up the details for that hex. And you can see how prevalent from a 0 to 100 score are animals and crops and other resources. Same thing with the elevation. You can get the elevation by selecting it there. You can configure terrain with the gear, so you can change background colors of the other types of terrain and so forth. Moving down to features. Features are something that we've expanded quite a bit. There's a lot of them, especially in my case right here. I've got the expansion packs installed in a drawer in a folder, and I'll explain that a little bit later. But I can filter this for just the isometric things, and I can then pick any of these. I can filter further, and I can say if I only want the ones that are cities, I can pick that. I can then drop it on the map too. And the cool thing here, we can select it so you can get a little orange highlight when you're close to the center of it, and then it highlights all yellow when you are there. You can resize it. You can also rotate it with the other handle here. And another cool thing is you can get the notes of that object. So right now, Worldographer has some information and generate data about cities, castles, and I believe ruins, and we'll be expanding that functionality to other things as well. But you see that it generates a bunch of stub information about that city, the government, the founding reason, population, affluence, and what the town guard is like. This is all fully editable by you. You can change it up. You can regenerate it. You can ignore it. Whatever you prefer. Either you can change the text here, or you can change the file, which I'll talk about again briefly a little bit later. Scrolling down, our shapes here. Now I'm going to show the shapes a little bit more later in the demo, but for our purposes here, you have a lot of additional options that you didn't have in Hexographer. You have options for the drop shadow, inner shadow, blur, the cap and join for the line, how you want them capped off or joined together from point to point. You also have some a reminder down here of how to move points, delete points, and add points to the middle of the line. So that's all useful. Down here on labels, I'll add a simple label. Do text, so I can put the label there. I can select it by really clicking any point in that label area. I can resize it with those same corner controls. I can rotate it with this middle control on the side here, and that's a lot easier to use than it was in Hexographer 1. I can set a style. So if I know that label is for a nation, I can give it a certain style, and that will lock the size, but you could still rotate it. And the advantage there is all your labels of a particular type can match up. So if you change it later, if you want your nations to be red, and the labels to be red, you can do so. And you can change all that here. You can add a new style as well. So that covers briefly the different drawers that are available. Talking about the menu bar up here, data. So the next thing to get into is the world info. So not only do we not only do we generate the map for you, but a lot of data about the world has been generated. Here you kind of have a blank intro area that you can fully edit. You can describe the concept of the world, what are the key things that people need to know about. But we've generated a bunch of information for nations. Initially, this is just a small amount of information for many nations, but we're going to be expanding that. We're still in beta at the moment. We'll be adding more options, more detail, more possible details about the different nations in the world. And again, this is all fully editable by you. You can add more details. You can delete things. You can regenerate it. You can ignore it if you don't want to use it. Same thing with cultures. Cultures drive the nations and religions. Religions, we have a pantheon here, and so you can get the details of all of those gods in that pantheon. You can also have gods that are solo, the demon sect, another one, a mystical religion, a monotheistic religion, and then there's another demon sect. So you have a lot of data generated about your world that you can then, you're able to change up or add to. And it's kind of great to have a starting point, I think, to have some ideas ready to go. And I know, I can look at things and I can see, okay, yeah, all that goes together except for one thing. Well, okay, I'll change that one thing. And it gets me a lot closer to creating a world quickly. So based on that information, though, now I'm going to delete this label because it's going to get in the way a little bit of our next feature. But based on that information, I'm going to zoom out a little bit too. We can generate the nations on the world map. So here I'm going to, because this is a smaller map, I'm going to set a smaller number of nations for it to create on the map. And you could delete some of those nations from the information, or you could consider some of them to be dead nations from years ago. But I can click OK, and it's going to place those onto our map here. And so we've got one there, and no, okay, there we go. There's 2 others, 3 others. So you can see that it will place them based on, you can see the nations that it created for you. Those are all placed based on the values that we saw in the terrain for the resources. It finds good places to place an initial city, a capital, if you will, and then it looks 2 to 3 hexes away for, are there enough resources in any of those hexes for it to build another city? If there are, then great, and it continues on expanding. If not, then it will look for, can I build a town there? And it will continue expanding. If neither a town or a city can be founded, well, it might look for villages or mining camps, lumber camps, that sort of thing, where it can place. So it can kind of get you started again with this. And all this is likewise fully editable. You can move these labels around, or the towns around. You can move the labels. You can change the shapes. In fact, if you don't like the fill, for example, because the classic Mastara maps, for example, if you will, would use a dark red border between every nation, you can go ahead and say, I want no fill, and we can change the color here to be a dark red, and you're set. I can deselect that, and you got it. So you can do that for each of the nations if you wanted to. So that leaves me to the next big feature that I want to show off, which is the view levels. So as we said before, we've got the concept of world, continent, and kingdom map levels. And to create the next level down, so we've got the world map created, it will ask us, the first time that we try to switch levels, it will ask us, hey, what do you want that next level to be? How large in relation to the current map level? And so by default, it's 6 to 1. A lot of people like to make a 6 to 1 map, particularly at the lowest levels. But I'm going to leave 6 to 1 here, and click OK. And it takes a moment to kind of create all that data and fill it in, but lo and behold, it's there. If I zoom out a little bit more, you can kind of zoom out a little bit more. You can kind of see a little bit more see a little bit more of the big picture. you can turn on the grid, and that gives you a better idea. So this gives us the 6:1 across, and you can see that there's 6 hexes in each of those larger hexes. We can do that again. We can drill down to the kingdom level, and this time, for the sake of this just being quick, I'm going to do a 3:1. Now, if we didn't do 3:1, if we did 6:1, well, it would be 2 to 3 times fat, or 2 to 3 times longer to do all that data, because you've got a different level of magnitude to create. But that was actually really quick. And again, if I zoom out a little bit more, you can see, though, you've got 3 hexes in each of the smaller, in the medium level hexes, I should say, and then still 6:1 for that. So that gives you an idea of what those map levels are like. You can then, make edits to any level, and some of the changes will cascade automatically, some won't. That'll be the subject of another tutorial, because it kind of gets a little bit detailed, and we're trying to do the big picture here. But if I zoom, or if I switch back out and then I zoom back in a little bit so you can see better. We'll talk about some of the other features that are here. In the data, we finished those. Well, actually, we didn't quite finish those. The last thing to talk about here with the data menu here is the update world name data file. That's something that you can customize all the values that are used to generate the data about the world or about the cities and so on. And if you go to the website, worldographer.com, there's a sample to work from, as well as a tutorial, or as well as some instructions there. And it's very likely we'll add a video tutorial of that as well. In tools, some of these are things that we've had in Hexographer before, like expanding the map by number of columns or rows. The terrain wizard does the nearest neighbor fill for a mostly blank map that has some terrain. Regenerating a map level is related to what we had just shown with the view levels, where if you change a map level quite a bit and not all the changes cascaded, you can regenerate it if you wanted to. Generate coasts, we'll do that here. So this is just going to add a bit of terrain that matches the different terrain hexes that are adjacent, to give you a more natural looking coastline. That's something we'll be expanding as time goes, where we'll be allowing it to indent as well as outdent. But that's what that does. Generate rivers is also something that we're still expanding, but at the moment it gives you kind of a flat river look. It does go downhill, so it looks at the elevation values, and it goes from hexes that are either the same or lower in elevation until it gets to a water hex. And this is something where we can select that shape. And if you want to improve the look, so that's something that we're working on. But if you want to improve the look and you want to make it more water-like, you can. One of the changes, though, is we also wanted to the width to change as it moves along, and so it'll be something that we work on as well as we move from beta to version 1.0. Let me deselect that so you get a better look at it. Converting an underlay. If you're tracing an image, which you do down here, there's some values. You can select an image file and set it up to be traced. If you're tracing an image, that can make a first cut at trying to approximate what terrain goes on top of which part of the map image that you're tracing. That's related to that functionality. The show the configuration folder. So if you want to change up, or add, rather, I should say, if you want to add terrain or features or textures to the tool, you can add those subfolders to whichever directory your computer shows up here. It's usually your user directory and then a Worldographer subdirectory. So if you add features or textures or terrain subfolders, and then if you follow a naming convention for each file, each image that you want to place there, then it would appear automatically in Worldographer when you restart it. But there's a little bit more to it than that. Again, something else we'll get into in another tutorial. There's currently instructions though on the Worldographer website if you want to read through those and give them a try. The options here, that we've got the autosave functionality in the tool now, so once you save the file, it will, every few minutes after that, it will try to save. Undo, redo functionality is something new in Worldographer. So if I, for example, if I want to add a couple of features, if I add a bunch of them and I say, oh no, I didn't want to do that, I can undo it. I can do Control-Z a few times to get rid of them all, and that's kind of cool. You can re-add them if you want. Control-Y will do that for you. And then if we move on to the file, we also have the select, cut, copy, paste. So you can, if you want to move a section, a continent, you could select it and move it. Another feature that we'll get into in another tutorial. Over here though, on the file menu, new, we've already gone over. Open, save, those all match up what you'd expect. Importing a Hexographer 1 map. Right now, since we're still in beta, we probably import about 90–95% of the features in Hexographer 1 maps. There's still a few things we're working on related to that, but you can give it a try and drop us a note if there's a map that's not working for you. Export an image, so that will make an image file out of your map. Export to PDF, so if you want to print later, exporting to PDF just gives you the advantage of kind of being able to preview the map and make sure it's set up the way you want it to, and then print that PDF file. Export notes or information to an HTML file, so if you've got a lot of data about your world, either the city information, the castle information, the nations, the religions, and so forth, that puts all that together into a web page, so then you could stylize it the way you want or put it into some other tool. Finally, loading and saving configurations. This is functionality where if you configure your text labels and your terrain and your features to be a certain way, where you set up the background colors or you change the sizes of the labels and so forth, if you set all that information up and you want to use it again for a later map, you can save the configuration. You can save the configuration and then you can reload the configuration when you're starting a new map. So that pretty much covers all the functionality here. A quick overview of all the functionality in Worldographer. If you want to make a comment or a suggestion, go ahead and make a post here on the video page. Go ahead and send me an email. I tried my best to stay on top of the support@inkwellideas.com email. So that's the best way to get a hold of me, but there's also the Kickstarter comments, the video comments here. There's other places where we have different social media presences. But definitely support@Inkwell is the best way to get a hold of us. So thank you for your support, and please do give the map utility, the Worldographer, a try. Go ahead and start up a map or import one and start working on it. Thank you.